Ever stand in line at the DMV and think, man, shouldn't we have this figured out by now?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Or dealing with mountains of paperwork.
Uh,
Makes you wonder if there's a better way, you know? Especially in human services where things can get really complicated. Like, could AI be the answer everyone's looking for?
right.
Oh, there's a company, HumanServices.ai, and they seem to think so. They're all about using AI to completely change how these services work.
Revolutionize is the word they use, actually.
Bold claim. So what are they actually, doing?
Well, that's what we're going to dive into. It's one thing to, talk about a revolution, but what does that actually look like in practice, right?
Exactly. So let's get specific. I was on their website, and they have a bunch of services listed. One that jumped out was AI strategy consulting.
Yep.
It sounds kind of vague. What does that even mean in this context?
So imagine like a superpowered consultant, one that can look at tons of data, like years of data on housing programs, for example, and figure out what actually works to reduce homelessness.
Interesting.
It's about using AI to help these organizations make smarter decisions.
So it's about making the services themselves more effective.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Then there's AI for philanthropy. That one sounds like something out of a movie. AI deciding where to donate millions of dollars.
It sounds futuristic, right? But it's closer to reality than you might think. Imagine an AI system looking at, say, donations to fight homelessness, and then figuring out the absolute best way to use that money to actually make a difference.
So like maximizing the impact of every dollar.
Exactly. They're basically saying they can build these custom AI systems for organizations that are trying to, make the world a better place.
Wow. Okay, so they're not just talking about making things a little bit faster with AI.
Mm-hmm.
They want to completely change how these services are designed, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty ambitious goal for sure.
Definitely ambitious.
Yeah.
And one thing that really stuck out to me on their site was this claim. AI model correctness, 89%. That doesn't sound like a perfect score.
Right.
What happens in those other 11% of cases? And how are they even measuring success when it comes to, people's lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Like in tech, an 89% success rate might be amazing depending on what you're doing.
Sure.
But when we're talking about services that directly impact whether someone has housing or healthcare or food.
All right, this isn't like, getting a wrong answer on a quiz.
Exactly. These decisions have huge consequences.
So how do they make sure their AI systems are making the right calls, especially when every situation is so different,
That's where things get really tricky. To understand that 89%, we have to look at how these AI models are actually built.
Like what kind of data are they feeding into it?
Exactly. And are there biases in that data?
They do mention using ethically sourced data and making sure their algorithms are fair. But how do you guarantee that?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? It's one thing to say it, but building ethical AI is tough. You need ways to spot and fix bias in every step.
And like you said, these are people's lives we're talking about.
Right, and the stakes are really high.
Okay, so we've got these big goals of changing everything with AI, but we also need to make sure it's all being done responsibly.
Definitely.
Now, they have a few blog posts about what they call real-life examples of their AI working. So there's this one, predicting needs, preventing crises, how AI is transforming child welfare. Kind of sounds like Minority Report, using data to predict the future.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's definitely an area where AI is being used more and more.
Really?
Yeah. It's not about predicting the future exactly, but think about all the information child welfare systems have. School records, healthcare visits, any reports of potential problems.
Right.
AI can analyze all of that and maybe spot patterns that could indicate a child might be at risk.
So instead of just reacting to a bad situation, you could potentially prevent it from happening in the first place.
That's the idea, yeah.
Sounds amazing, but also a bit tricky, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're making big decisions based on an algorithm.
Absolutely. And it's not about replacing human judgment completely.
Right.
It's about giving social workers more information, better tools to help them make the best decisions. But transparency is key. Everyone needs to understand how these algorithms are working.
Makes sense. They also have a post about AI and, those big public benefit programs like food stamps and unemployment.
Right.
What's the thinking there? Just making the process faster.
Efficiency is a big part of it, yeah. Imagine an AI that can check if someone's eligible for a program, verify documents automatically.
Oh, wow.
It could cut down on so much paperwork and red tape.
Right. Less waiting for everyone. But, and maybe I'm being overly cautious here, but could these systems become biased?
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge concern.
Yeah.
If the data used to train the AI already has biases built in, then the AI will just learn those biases.
And then you're just making the problem worse, not better.
Exactly. That's why you need diverse teams building these systems, people who are checking for bias at every step of the way.
So it sounds like this isn't a set it and forget it kind of thing. You need to constantly be watching, making sure it's working the way it's supposed to.
Exactly. It requires ongoing collaboration, data scientists, social workers, policymakers,
Yeah.
everyone working together.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, there's one more post I wanted to touch on. It's titled, The Future of Human Connection, How AI is Enhancing, Not Replacing, Human Interaction in Social Services. I feel like that's addressing a concern a lot of people have that AI will just make these services feel cold and impersonal.
Oh, for sure. That's a common fear.
Right.
But the reality is, many jobs in human services involve a ton of paperwork, data entry, just administrative stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
AI can handle a lot of that, freeing up social workers to spend more time with people, actually doing what they're trained to do.
So it's not about replacing humans. It's about letting them focus on the human element.
Exactly. Building relationships, offering emotional support, connecting people with the right resources, that's where humans excel.
That's a much better picture than what we usually see in the movies, that's for sure. But it also makes me think about the people in these jobs, the social workers. They'll need training, right?
Yeah.
To adapt to this new world.
Absolutely. As AI becomes more common in this field, training is going to be essential. Social workers need to understand how these technologies work, how to use them effectively and ethically.
It's a whole new set of skills, basically.
Mhm.
So much to consider. It feels like this AI thing could be huge for human services, but we really have to get it right.
Absolutely. It's not just about the technology itself, it's about how we use it.
Right. And for folks who are listening to all this, like, okay, this is big, but what can I do? What would you tell them?
I'd say first, don't feel overwhelmed. It's complicated stuff, but even just by tuning in today, you're already learning, so keep learning. Read about AI, especially how it's being used in these fields, things that matter to people.
So become informed citizens because these decisions affect all of us eventually, right?
Exactly. And talk about it. Don't underestimate your voice. Support groups working on ethical AI. Tell your elected officials that this stuff matters to you. The more people who speak up, the better chance we have of getting it right.
It's like we're not just asking if AI will change the world, but how it'll change it. And how do we want to shape that, especially for something as important as human services?
That's the question, isn't it? Technology is just a tool at the end of the day. We decide how to use it to help people or to make existing problems even worse. That's the challenge and the opportunity in front of us.
A lot to think about. So listeners, your homework is to get informed, ask questions, and make your voice heard. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive on AI and human services.